Welcome to the Immigrant Magazine Weekly. I'm Pamela Anchang. Did you know that you could make or shoot a movie using an iPhone? Well, for all aspiring filmmakers, this edition is for you. Mondo Hollywoodland is a psychedelic comedy co-written, directed, and filmed using an iPhone by my guest, Janek Ambros. Janek has produced and written some of Hollywood's most remarkable films and worked with the most remarkable actors. And today, we're going to talk about what his project entailed using an iPhone. You want to sit tight and learn a few things, especially if you're struggling with a small budget or thinking about hiring a crew and not even knowing how you're going to be able to pay for all the things that come with it. Well, before we bring him to the show, do me the honors, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet by clicking on the subscribe button here below, liking us so YouTube will share our videos, and of course, ring the notification bell so that you will be notified when this content is released. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Pam Anchang, and like us on the Immigrant Magazine on Facebook. So I want to welcome Janek to the show. Now, Janek, you know, I massacred your name. I said Janek when I should have said Janek, but you say it's okay.
It's fine. There's a lot of variations I'll hear throughout my life, and it's totally cool.
Yeah, so many will be wondering why Janek, not Janek. So please give us your background. Your family immigrated from where?
Yeah, so I was born actually in New Jersey and grew up in Albany, New York. My parents came from Poland. I have birthright citizenship, so I'm a Polish citizen as well. It's a kind of a, you know, I think like most people who come from Poland and Eastern Europe and Europe, I guess around that time after World War II, it's a lot of wild stories, honestly, of how it eventually kind of ended up in America. But thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure, especially when I'm talking to children of immigrants, because I have children too. And sometimes in fact, just yesterday, I was having a conversation with my son, and there's some cultural differences that I told him. I said, we disagree. And I told him, I said, you know, son, you have to bear with me. I have to bear with you, because there's some things that you say to me that as an immigrant parent, or, you know, having been born and raised in Africa, you would not say that. You will be in trouble. But, you know, you just say it so casually, you know, and then he's also like, but mom, there are things that you also say to me that here is like, it's like abuse. I'm like, in my culture, if my mom said stupid, it doesn't mean I'm stupid. But here you say stupid, and the kid is like, oh, you called me stupid, means I'm stupid. And now they have to see a psychiatrist. It's just ridiculous. So tell me about your experience being raised by immigrant parents. Did you experience things, that kind of cultural difference?
Not so much. I mean, I think it was more about what kind of like shaped a little bit of what I ended up kind of making, with film and stuff like that. It was more so much about like there definitely was like a sense of like an assimilation type thing when I got here. But it like really some of like the stories of my grandparents and stuff like that really shaped what I ended up making. Cause like, so my grandfather when in the invasion of Poland in 1939 from the Russians, he was actually he was sent to Siberia in like a gulag when he was like a teenager. So once the Germans invaded the Soviets in 1941, there was this agreement, and they kind of let go the prisoners of the labor camp. So how it all happened was like they were let go, but they weren't given any resources. So they were basically had to traverse on foot and kind of form their own kind of army in exile. So they went, so he was in Siberia, and then they went and traversed all the way, mostly all the way to like Uzbekistan, and then like went to, Palestine, Iran, Iraq. And what they were doing was they were kind of, they got put under the auspices of General Alexander in the British Army. So after going through all that, where the Soviets put them in, gulags and stuff like that, they kind of trained themselves to go all the way to Italy to fight against the Nazis in the Battle of Monte Cassino, and they eventually did win that battle with the British forces, Anders' armies, the Polish army, and that led the door, kind of for Rome, and then the war started winding down, and then in the Yalta Conference, the United States kind of gave Poland. They were doing, carving up the pieces, most like the big powerful countries do after a war, like Churchill and FDR, and Poland was given back to the Soviets. So it was this kind of strange thing, like we defeated Nazis, but we have to deal with them. So kind of what that made me interested in was like it made me immediately always like very anti-war. Obviously, and it's funny because that's an example of like defeating the Nazis is like obviously that is like the best example of like a world banding together to defeat like the ultimate evil, right? Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, it's still like I feel like it's a very like it's a very like World War I, World War II, what was just going on in the Mideast and is still going on in the Mideast. It made me really interested in like trying to tackle these subjects, especially from a more critical perspective of the United States. Because I think some people who might have like more of an immigrant background or their parents are from another country, have a different kind of name, they might feel a little bit less inclined to be critical of the United States. But I kind of totally flip that and feel like, okay, well, that's kind of what makes this country, if there's, the few elements that we have that to make this country better is to criticize it as much as we can to make it better, right? So that's really kind of what helped me shape a lot of what I make, is kind of this background of understanding how complicated geopolitics are, how intense war is, through my family story. That made me kind of always like, almost always focus on war or politics more broadly, or injustices, really from anywhere in the world. But yeah, so that's I would say how the immigrant experience, I guess, shaped what I do now as a filmmaker.
That's amazing, because it's so funny you're talking about the carving of, the different countries after the war. And Africans are talking about the Berlin Conference and the carving of African nations, not even based on the people, but based on interest and resources for
resources.
And so now maybe I have more in common, let's say, with someone from Nigeria, but then Nigeria is an independent country on its own, and it's given to partition and given to Britain, and my country is given to France, and it's just interesting. It's so interesting to hear that aspect, because we don't think about that, and and it's interesting how this shapes us and who we become, and
yeah, I mean, the United States and a lot of, like I said, kind of like the big players, I think people should be, especially right now, we're going through so much of a situation in which we're trying to be more aware. And there's a lot of like, people saying, hey, this is an important subject on the internet and stuff like that. But I think people need to go a little bit deeper and say, what are we participating in when it comes to how we treat other countries that are more impoverished, like say, Eastern Europe or parts of Africa, and what are our intentions when we do, quote unquote, carve some of this stuff up? Who is it for exactly? So I think these are things that I think as a culture, we should, if we're really going to go to a more like, hey, we need to be aware and all these things, we got to go a little bit deeper than just kind of like, saying this is bad, this is good. It's like we really need to look at ourselves a little bit and see how we're participating. And I understand how it could be difficult for some people, especially like I said, if maybe you're an immigrant or whatever, you feel like a little bit like, well, no, I'm here, I need to kind of assimilate. But no, it's like I think it's important to really give that outside perspective, even if it is critical against the United States, because what's the best way to make something better is to criticize the problem with it and try to move on from that,
Well, you're a white guy in Hollywood, and you were born here, so you could talk. Well, some of us can't talk. We're immigrants, right? We have to be okay, but no one's going to deport you anywhere, so you go ahead and talk. But we'll send you.
Exactly. No, absolutely.
You represent. So I'm curious to know, how did your interest in filmmaking begin? I granted you so versed in the history and all of this, but not everybody's going to go into filmmaking. And you have done some amazing work with really big players.
Yeah, so I think growing up, I was really lucky to have these cousins, and they were in Jersey, and they gave me this like list of films, and it was like to me that was like the most like American list of films. It was like Goodfellas, Casino, Scorsese films like Menace to Society, New Jack City, a lot of gangster like films. And to me that was always very interesting because it was like, it was like cool, and of course there's obviously complexities. This is when I was like a teenager, but to me that that kind of like broad spanning list of like of gangster films, Scorsese films, Coppola films, all those things, that to me was like, oh, that's America. I was like, which is a weird thing, but those movies actually do touch upon that a lot. American Dream, especially The Godfather. That's a very much a movie about immigration, about being an immigrant, especially Godfather Part 2, and about being the son of somebody coming from across the pond. So those I got really into, and then I to a point where I was like, started to make little films, and I was kind of secretly writing, but like I wasn't really like, oh, I'm just gonna go to a film school. I kind of wanted to like still go to school and learn about other things first, but I've always knew I wanted to do that. But I kind of went a roundabout way and tried to learn about more like economics and stuff like that, because I kind of knew one thing when seeing this country is money makes money's every in this country, right? Yes. So I wanted to learn a little bit about that before doing film, and then I kind of eventually it met at an apex. So I was able to kind of like make very, very small movies, usually even using just like stock archival footage from like propaganda films, and I was making experimental films. But as I slowly tried to make them a little bit bigger, and then I started producing and all that. So yeah, it really stemmed from this kind of like excitement of being like, what's like watching a movie like a Scorsese film or The Godfather, and saying like, oh, that's so cool. Like what to me that is what in a weird way I saw America as is through these like films, and I think to some degree it probably is accurate. They're very accurate portrayals of at least some parts of America. So it's like that's what kind of started it, I guess, if that answers the question.
That's interesting how whatever medium we're given may shape how we see things. I was growing up back in Africa, in Cameroon, and seeing like the Jacksons, and the big celebrities, from America. That's what sells. That's what has sold America to the world, through the eyes of film and entertainment in general.
Yeah.
And even Bruce Lee, and all this is like, it makes you dream of America, and then you get here and then the reality hits you, and now it's like, okay, it's a land of opportunity, but you gotta work. And that brings me actually to your, I think one of your latest works, Mondo Hollywoodland.
Yeah.
Psychedelic film, and which is why I wanted to also talk today, because you made that movie using an iPhone.
Right.
And you co-executive produced it with James Cromwell, the Academy Award winner. No, nominee, right?
Nominee.
Yeah. And for starters, you tell me how you even got to collaborating with him, and then we can talk about this iPhone and what it's capable of doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So James is great. When I made my first feature film, which was a documentary, it was about the war on terror and how it impacts the countries we intervene with, and how it impacts civil rights and civil liberties here at home. So, like domestic surveillance against Muslims or people or dissidents and stuff like that. So I sent it to him. I was like 25, so I was really like, it was very low budget, but it was a doc. So you can get away with that a little bit. And I sent it to him because I knew that he was somebody who's very, we talk about aware. He's very politically aware. He's an activist. He just very involved in all that, and he liked it. So he was like, yeah, I'll put my name on it, and like and to help the film or whatever. So that's how I met him originally, and that was obviously really, it gave me some confidence because, you know, I don't know if anybody ever will even like this thing. It was like a small budget doc. It was about some, you know, it was during the Obama administration, so not too many people were kind of tackling the foreign interventionist stuff. So it wasn't exactly like the most like fun topic to talk about at the time, and like so that was cool with him. And then so this film, it all started, I went to this like AFI film festival, and Paul Thomas
Mondo Hollywoodland.
Yeah, so in 2014, Paul Thomas Anderson, the director, is one of my favorites, of course. He presented Mondo Hollywood, the 1967 version. And then I remember seeing that, and I was like, and it's like this very bizarre, psychedelic kind of Mondo film. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool to do like a unprofessional, fun, goofy, updated version I shot it in like 2019, but like taking place in like the, you know, the end of the Trump years kind of thing, right? At least part one. But so that was like, that's how it started. And then it was really just and then James, I asked him if he wanted to be involved, and he's very much into like the 60s psychedelic films and especially in Europe too, and all these things like that. So he eventually said yes, and that's how he came on board this one too, to act as executive producer and like presenter and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's kind of how it all started with him, and kind of the origin story of how Mondo started in general.
So let's talk about the fact that you've been involved with a lot of great films. So I'm just trying to wrap my brain around, why did it occur to you that you could do this film with an iPhone? Is it something that filmmakers think about? And are there any films I've made with iPhones, or is this innovative? Because I watched it, by the way, and you are in it also. I was like, that's got to be Janek. That's you. And then when the credits were rolling, I was like,
I look a little different. Yeah. It was shot years ago, but yeah, I look a little different. But yeah, so it's interesting. So you mentioned I've produced films that are bigger and stuff like that. So what the thing is when you're trying to direct a movie and you're trying to direct something with like a budget, you have to have some track record, or you have to have something you've done. But that's kind of a chicken and egg situation, because you're saying, well, how can I do the film? How can you give me money to make a movie? But you have to say I have had to already make a movie. That doesn't make any sense, right? Because then how are you going to do the first? So the trick is, and I was really lucky, I would bother like some big filmmakers, their assistants, and I'd say, hey, can Francis Ford Coppola, somebody I was trying to get a hold of when I was really young. I was like, can I talk to him? So eventually I did talk to him, and he was adamant on saying, don't worry about the expenses and the camera, just do something. Because I think a lot of filmmakers, it's difficult because you just keep waiting to kind of get this big, large sum of money. And it doesn't really, of course, sometimes it does, and that's great. But really, if you look at most filmmakers' careers, even back in the day when people presume that like, oh, you know, filmmakers, their first movies, they had some money and they got like, they started making smaller films. So I kind of had to let go of the ego of saying, okay, well, I'm not going to make this like picture perfect, couple $1 million budget movie. Instead, I embraced the idea of it being unprofessional and being like, and I say with quotations, because if you look at a lot of the films in the 60s in Europe and stuff, I mean, they were very raw. They feel more nostalgic now because they're done with these, but that was because back then that looked cheap, right? So with this film, I really wanted to just totally break open form entirely, and of course, because it's like a silly kind of funny comedy-ish, it's like I was able to kind of just know that okay, it's not trying to take itself seriously, so it really let the form just explode open and just be kind of this, psychedelic political satire. And the phone was just the obvious thing because I always have. It's like if you had a huge 35 millimeter camera on you, but it's just in your pocket. So I was able to just shoot scenes with friends. So I casted all of my friends in LA. Most of them were all just friends. Some of them aren't even actors. So I would just be able to say we're at a bar. I could just say, hey, let's shoot a scene right now. I have my phone. And of course there was more days where it was more professional. We had a sound person and stuff like that. But no, it was very freewheeling. It was very sprawling. It was very crazy, as you know, since you saw the movie. Very much influenced by really weird movies of the 60s and all that. But yeah, so that's kind of how it was, just purely out of necessity because there wasn't the infrastructure. Because I produced movies that are multi-million dollars, but it's different when you're trying to direct something. So you just gotta kind of have to be crafty with it, you know?
That's interesting. So do you have to have like a special skill set to be able to kind of like, or
No.
you know, how does that work? I was
No, it's pure, especially with that film. It's just like, no, we didn't even use lenses. It was just one. I was just one. It was just the actual iPhone 8 Plus, I think, just the standard camera. And this is what Coppola said to me. He goes, don't care about the camera, because ultimately, like, if you could spend all your life trying to get this money to make it look perfect, but he says, you know, so many people can make it look, but it's like just trying to tell your story. And then, because after 10 minutes, like most people will see this and say, this is odd, it looks like low budget, but if you're open to it, after 10 minutes, it starts just being part of the film, you know? But no, you don't need any training for that. I mean, for most films, you don't really need, like, you need some, I guess, training, but I think a lot of that's manufactured to have people pay for film school. It's a for-profit. Yeah, I mean, I'm very cynical when it comes to...
No, that sounds like something somebody told me, that school is meant for us to pay, that create the...
Yeah, exactly. I'm very cynical about a lot of things. I'm not about education, obviously. Everybody, you know, education and all that stuff. Even film school is important, but don't, you know, I would say to people, don't feel too threatened by not being able to go to film school for your film career, because ultimately, you know, you don't really need too much for it.
You are freaking me out, because I'm having this conversation with my son who is in college, and he tells me this, like, Mom, I want to be at this. And I said, no, get me the degree first. It'll be mine, but you go finish that school before you know. So we are talking to...
It depends what you're doing. I mean, if you're going to be a doctor, you got to go to get your
No, he wants to do it. He wants to be in entertainment. And he says, I don't need this to do this. And I say, well, what about the options? What if it doesn't work out? You know?
Yeah, no, I get that. And I think that was a little bit of a conversation when I was younger too, where it was like, well, what if I understand the business of entertainment, just so the writing and directing doesn't quite work, but in a weird way, they feed off each other. So I'm able to write, get paid to write screenplays and direct films, because I kind of built a little bit of an infrastructure with understanding the business of it. So I see what you're saying. I think, but if he was like, I wanted to be a film director, I don't think it's worth. But if he's entertainment more broadly, there's absolutely benefits to getting, you know, a degree and stuff like that. So like, it depends what, you know what I mean?
Right. No, we'll talk about our camera.
Yeah.
So anyway, Mondo Hollywoodland. What do you want filmmakers to take out of it? And I know you mentioned that you had distribution, you know, in places, that you wanted to use this opportunity to, you know, to let people know about some possibilities. Do you care to share?
Yeah. So one of the things that Assembly Line, my company, does as well is I seek out projects that are, you know, I just produced a film with my friend Gallo from Ecuador, and like these other films from other parts of the world, because I just feel like it's like Roger Ebert used to call it the empathy machine movies.
Right.
So what I thought it would be interesting is to try to like find really cool movies that are outside the United States, predominantly like Latin America, Africa, Eastern Europe, Asia. It's like, maybe because traditionally, like Western Europe, we kind of do see those movies. They're always in conversation. They're always like, oh, they have money behind it. There's international finance behind it. But I love watching movies that are from totally different cultures and just like being like, oh, what's this, right? No matter what the budget is. So that's one of the things that I'll try to do is I'll find projects and try to help bring them to an American audience on a small scale, nothing major. But also I think with Mondo, like, what I want, hopefully, to some people, especially younger people, is to look at that and say, even if they don't like it, just to say, oh, well, look, I could go and do something with a phone. Because I think, once again, we're taught you need to have the professionals say yes, you need to wait for people to give you money, but you could just go out and do it. And I've seen a lot of that being done in other parts of the world, like Cinema Nova, which was in Brazil. That was a movement of like very psychedelic 60s movies, and it was very guerrilla style filmmaking and stuff like that. So it's like I think it's important for people to see, like, oh, you can do something for cheap. You know, like I said, even if they don't like it, whatever. But just the idea that it exists, you're able to get limited theatrical and a distribution. And like I think you bet so I wanted to make sure it was playing in other, the distribution would be happening in other parts of the world other than just the United States and Canada and Australia. So that was definitely part of it too. Not by any means, I'm not saying, oh, that was why I made it, but I hope that by making it, it can maybe encourage someone to say, hey, maybe I can pick up a phone with my friends and shoot something. Because also at the end of the day too, it's not just about outcome. I think we're trained in this country a lot to think about outcome. Really, the process is the part, right? It's the whole point of making films. If you really are stripping it down to the point of any of this, because we're all just dust in the wind. Like, it's like, what connections am I making with people when making this movie? What am I finding out about myself during this movie, during the making of this movie? So I think with an outcome obsessed country and society or whatever, it's important to remember too, is that even just by making it, you're learning something about you or about what you're trying to drive at, or making relationships with the people you're making it with, and so on and so forth. So that's important to remember too. And you don't need money to do that. You might need money to have a really successful outcome because you need money to some sort of profit or whatever. But no, if you're just making a film as a more of an artistic thing, it shouldn't necessarily be focused totally on like, what's the outcome of this,
This is such great information, Janek. I there's so many filmmakers that I know, or aspiring filmmakers, and I know some that have scripts upon scripts, and sometimes they're like, oh, I got it. Oh, I got this person attached to my film. And then next thing you know, nothing happened. Oh, I got this. Oh, the money didn't come through. I hear it every day and I feel sad. And I see people that have spent years and years hoping for that break because they need someone to fund their film. And here you are saying that we all have, listen, I was a Samsung Galaxy. My kids are like, Mom, nah, you have to have an iPhone. So nowadays, every family has an iPhone somewhere, and you are just validating that it's okay. You can actually make a film using your iPhone because, like you said, it's not about the outcome. Sometimes there's a process and living that dream of being a filmmaker. But I know that they'll be asking though, how would they distribute a film made?
Well, that's the thing is now there's so much platforms that you can distribute almost as long as. The key is just start making it. And then all of a sudden you'll find out, hey, maybe this part's good. Maybe this part isn't good. And the next thing you know, you show somebody in the industry, maybe who you were originally hoping would give you that big break. And they say, oh, you're making something. It just starts, it makes the wheels go. Because once you sit around and I think wait for money. Now there's certain situations where I do think it's okay. If you have an intellectual property, like a screenplay that's a little bit more expensive and you want, but yeah, it's a dangerous trap because, and then it's like the old joke in a lot of movies, like, oh, time to have a meeting about having a meeting about having a meeting about Hollywood, where it's just meetings about meetings about meetings about meetings, and it's just this kind of absurd thing where it's like job relevancy. It's like so many and people who have already have success and are wealthy. I mean, they'll be just trapped too sometimes, and then next thing you know, it's 6 years later, and you go, we didn't make anything. There's companies I know that I have friends who worked at companies that had tens of millions of dollars behind it. And I think I have one friend who told me that he worked there for 3 years, and it was a company with an office, and they didn't make a single thing in the 3 years. So it's like, and I understand they're actually, as a writer, I understand though, it is important that that's a good thing for writers because that means that there's projects being floated around and so on and so forth. But yeah, but if you want to go out and produce and make something, you could definitely have these projects where you're waiting for someone to say yes to give you money. Absolutely. But it doesn't hurt to have something on the side to kind of just make, so you kind of break through a little bit from that spiral of just kind of like waiting for someone else to say yes.
Just waiting, it never comes through.
Right, exactly.
So if now, someone watching this interview, how, you are in the process of creating this opportunity for them. So are you looking for people to submit stories to you, or what is the message?
No, it's mostly with stuff like films. I'll look for stuff that are usually like around the finish line, to be honest, because it's such a like, because it ends up being kind of the same conversation of like, well, I don't know what I can do really to help. Like, if maybe you start it and maybe it's in post-production or something, then it's something that we'll look at more and stuff like that. But no, I mean, obviously I'm very open door policy. I like to hear from everybody. So.
No, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And you know, now there's no excuse. Now, if someone is not making something, because before, if you said somewhere along the finish line, but somebody's waiting for that funding, then they'll say, oh, but I don't have any funding. But now you're telling them you have no excuse.
Yeah, look, I mean, yeah, and I will say the no excuse stuff, there is sometimes that can go too far because it does cost something. And if people have jobs, right? Because you need time. So what I would recommend to somebody is, if you want to make it, because it's not so much even about the equipment because yeah, you're right. Now that the costs have gone lower because the cell phone, if you just made, yes. But it requires, at least a month or something. And if you work, what do you get? So you basically need to allocate money for time, basically like pay yourself, yes. Or to have some money saved so you can sustain for a couple months. So that what I would say, just so people don't feel too like, there's no excuse, because it is difficult, especially if you have 2 jobs. Mm-hmm. How are you gonna make it? So I think the key is to understand that, it is possible, but you just have to kind of maybe plan it, there's definitely an avenue for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, because there's cost, if you have actors, you have to take care of them. Sometimes you don't want to pay yourself, but you want to pay the actors. And then, I mean, that you still have to have some kind of budget,
Yeah, exactly. There needs to be, there's usually some sort of,
or whatnot.
Yeah, but I would say once you start getting it going a little bit, it'll start kind of, it doesn't need to be done in exactly a professional filmmaking way where it's like 18-day shoot, 5 out of 7 days a week, 9 to 5. No, you start slowly when you have time, and then you show people and you get them excited about the project. So it's a slow beginning process, but as long as you just start doing something that's actual content, that'll be better, especially now because there's so many platforms for content,
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Janek. And how can those that have projects along the finish line, is there any way they can reach you? Is there?
Yeah, absolutely. You could go to assemblylineentertainment.com, and feel free to, anybody if has any questions or anything like that, obviously feel free. There's the email address is on there, and you can check out assemblylineentertainment.com, Assemblyline Entertainment on Instagram, and then my Twitter's Janek Ambros 88, Janek with a J.
Yeah, I know, Janek. Many of us I know would say Janek and spell it with a J, we spell it with a Y. So why don't you tell me about some of those African countries where you film, where Mondo is being distributed right now?
Yeah, so I believe, I think Cameroon's one of them.
Oh, Cameroon, that's where I'm from.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so I know that for sure. Nigeria, well, they have such an amazing industry on its own. So that,
and Nigeria is big, though. I mean,
yeah. Bollywood's really interesting.
Hollywood, of course. Hollywood's number one. Bollywood, Nollywood.
Nollywood's. Yeah, they have some very interesting stuff. I want to verse myself more at that. It's very cool. Like there's a whole that industry's really vibrant. Like there's a lot of interesting filmmakers coming out of there.
Yes,
that's really cool. Lagos and stuff like that. So yeah, no, I think from what I saw, it's mostly most countries in Africa.
Okay, so where in this country? So if you talk about Cameroon, for example, do you know, or is there a website, or how should they?
I'm not exactly sure because it just was released a few weeks ago. There, I have to check. I believe there's probably some sort of streaming platform it's on, but
movie theaters are not commonplace in some of these countries. You know that movie theaters like cinemas. Yeah, they're not really commonplace. So
no, this is all streaming and stuff like that.
Okay.
And then in the US, you can check it out on Amazon Prime, and then I believe they're just on. They might even just be on Amazon in those countries. I'm not exactly sure. I have to check.
Yeah, well, we live in digital time, so the world is
exactly
compressed, so they can go online and find it. Yeah. Well, Janek, any last words for aspiring filmmakers, mistakes, what not to fall, the traps not to fall into besides waiting for Godot, waiting forever?
Just don't wait. Just don't wait. If you want to be a film director, you have to direct and stuff. Like, you can't wait. That's my biggest thing. But thank you so much. And it was amazing meeting you at the Polish Film Festival. So thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
No, you're very welcome. Listen, there's a lot that we're going to do together, and I'm just excited that someone that has this much experience, because you saying it, you've done the big ones, the small ones, all of that. When it comes from you, they're inclined to listen. They're like, oh, if he can do that, if he says so, then, you know, it means I can do it. So I'm really, really happy that you wanted to do this. It's really going to help somebody out there. And so we're going to make sure.
So.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. And you have made your parents really proud because you have owned your heritage. This is really making our immigrant children, you know, have that sense of belonging. And
I don't know. My Polish is very bad, pretty much non-existent. So I don't know if I need to work on that. And then maybe my mom will be happier. But yeah, no, I gotta brush up on the Polish. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, no problem.
Yeah, nie mówię po polsku. Yeah, it's not good. I gotta learn that. I gotta get the stone. I gotta relearn the whole thing.
That's no problem. I wouldn't know better anyway. So thank you so much, Janek. And
all right, thank you.
Yes, and we'll stay tuned for all the upcoming projects. But this Mondo is gonna set a precedent for filmmakers that have little or no budget, and of course, giving them the opportunity to reach out to you even with questions is just something honorable. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks. Bye-bye. We've come to the end of our show. Thank you so very much for joining me today. I would love to hear what you think about our discussion. So please share your thoughts in our comment section or send me an email to publisher@immigrantmagazine.com. Now be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram @Anchang and like us on Facebook, The Immigrant Magazine. See you next time on The Immigrant Magazine Weekly.